Hey everybody, welcome to Leon's Chainsaw Parts and Repair. We've got another Homelite 330 carb we're going to go through today. This one will be a Zama version, the C1S H3. I believe there was an H7 that was used on some very later ones. Not a lot of difference, okay? Not enough to sweat. But we'll do a video specific to this carb. Before we get into it, I want to do a little bit of cleanup, but I want to show you guys what I'm looking at. The carb is pretty clean overall, but down at the bottom, you can see remnants of the old boot, and I want to use the wire wheel and get rid of that crap. This is definitely the time to do it. When it's off the saw, well, obviously when it's off the saw, but when you're tearing it apart, just clean everything up. So these are relatively simple. I say that about all the carbs, I know that, but they are relatively simple. We do need to pull the high-low grommet off, though, in order to get in here. So we're going to take the fuel pump side apart first. Okay. Okay, so this one hasn't been totally molested. It has the proper gaskets in the proper spots. So this is one of those models that you really want to pay attention to, because there's actually 3 pieces on the fuel pump side. I'm going to peel them apart so that you guys can see. Alright. Diaphragm still goes down to the carb deck first, then your gasket, and then this auxiliary diaphragm. And I would have to stare at a breakdown of this carb to understand that. But I do know without it, it's not going to run right. So that's the impulse inlet there. That's why there was a tiny little bit of gobbledygook. Okay. Now, and take note, there is no screen in here, so somebody has been into this carb at some point. I'm going to take the zoom off just a bit, because I run the risk of getting out of frame here. Let's go to the other side. Okay, and this cover has absolutely nowhere to pry on to get it apart. So, let's hope for the best. There we go. A little crunchy, but not bad. That would have actually worked. In all reality, this carb, dummy, these flappers are stiff. That needed to be rebuilt. And you can see there's an accumulation of something. So, that all needs to be cleaned out, and the gasket tore as that was coming apart. So we're going to probably have to get the razor blade out to clean that up. Note that this is one of those Zama carburetors that uses this plastic disc. Don't freaking break or lose this. They're unobtainium. Short of finding another carb that you can then use for parts, but it's a hell of a shame to take one off the road just because that thing got lost. But the new the diaphragms don't have a way to interact with that arm without it. Now, could you 3D print this? Yeah, you probably could. You could. I don't have a 3D printer, so I'm just not going to lose it or break it. All right, let me grab a razor blade and get the rest of this gasket out of the way so we can go ahead and pop the needle out. Or at least get enough of it out of the way. Doesn't have to be perfect. I will make it perfect when I'm doing the rest of the cleanup. Just like most of these two-stroke carburetors, you don't need to take the screw all the way out. Just let the pin come up high enough that you can then get it out. And that's it. So I can see right through that fuel passage. It's clear. So I'm going to go ahead, clean all this deck surface up. Clean all of whatever this residual crud is. I don't know if that's evaporated fuel or what. I have a feeling that's what it is evaporated fuel. Clean all that crap out, and then we'll come back and we'll put it together. Okay, everything's cleaned up, but there's still a couple more steps, or at least one specifically of due diligence that I'm going to take on this carburetor. Now, normally you don't need to do this. It's not common. I can count on one hand the number of high-speed nozzle check valves that I've actually replaced in here, in one of these carbs. But it has happened. Now, with the way these are designed, unless rotten fuel is able to sit in the valve, I'm not sure how it could actually get damaged. But if you just have a persistent runnability issue with one of the Zama carbs specifically, I can't remember if the Walbro has this same kind of nozzle. It may. But I've noticed it specifically with the Zama. I can remember at least one occasion where I had to replace that because it just wasn't sealing properly. It's very similar to the check valve assembly that's in an HDC or SDC carburetor, except again, this is the high-speed nozzle, and you can't do any testing on it that I'm aware of without taking it out. Now, if somebody knows a way, drop it in the comments, but I don't think there is. So let's get into this. Okay. Like I say, without getting into it, you can't do anything. And to get into it, you need to pull, or I am going to pull the high-speed adjustment needle out. Some of these pass all the way through and actually meter in that, but I'm not remembering if this one does or not. So that's why we're just going to take it out. I can see that this is a common fuel inlet. There's only one hole drilled right here. Alright, so adjustments that you make to your high speed are going to impact your low speed. And look at that. I'm still not convinced. Maybe it didn't hit that, but if you were to drive this out and bung that needle up and destroy it, that would sure suck. So I just make it a habit of removing them. There was actually some residue on the seat of this. That's interesting. I'm going to definitely say some fuel dried up in here. Alright, let's see how much of a pain in the booty this is going to be to get out. Alright, it is going to be a pain. So I'm going to do something different. I need to support underneath here so I'm not impacting the throttle arm or that fuel barb. Because I don't want either one of those broken. Let's see if this... What do you know? short a 2x4 that doesn't have the right dimensions works. That should be enough to prevent some damage. There it goes. So it drives straight out into the throat of the carb, and out she comes. And you can see when it focuses, there we go. There's just a little piece of synthetic diaphragm material in there. So how am I going to test that? Well, I'm going to slip a piece of hose over the end of it. Because just like the way the HDC and the SDC are set up, we should be able to allow air through, but not a whole lot going back. Perfect. This valve is good. Nozzle, whatever you want to call it. And most of the time it is good. And that's why most of the time I don't drive one out. But since I'm doing a video on this, I wanted you guys to see it. So now when you set it back into place, you're just going to drive it in flush, just like it was. And one more love tap. There we go. Good enough. So again, it's very rare that you need to go into it at that level. Very, very rare. All right. I think we're at a point where we can start putting this bad boy back together. So Zama did nobody any favors with their part numbering system. And they really did nobody any favors when they up and changed it. Sometime in, I believe, the early to mid 1990s, because I have books from the late 80s where it's still the old K numbers. Alright. So I will try to put a list in the description of all the kits that will work for a C1S H3 carburetor, but off the top of my head, the RB3, the GND, I'm not even going to say it. I'm not going to say it because I'm going to mess it up. I will put a list in there. There's 2 Zama numbers. There's the Homelite number. Actually, 3 Zama numbers now that I think about it. The Homelite part number for Homelite's kit, and then any other manufacturer that used a carb very similar to this is going to have their own branded kit. So, yeah, it's kind of fun. All right, we're going to reuse the spring, the axle, and the arm. We're going to drop a new needle in. Oh, baby. Is this one I'm going to have to put a little drop of oil on? We'll see. Sweet. Slide that over. Again, you got to get real good at not launching these across your shop, because the parts are damned hard to find. Okay, it's moving. That's tight, good enough. Let's go ahead and assemble the fuel pump side, but first we need to get a new screen in there. Again, these come pre-formed up to a point, and it's up to you to not screw that up. And I'm not being a jerk about it, because I've done it. You've got to find a tool that's close to the outside diameter. Shunk. There it is. If you do that, like that, every time, your headaches and heartaches will be minimal. But if you mess up that factory beginning of a bend, ugh, you need help at that point. Because it's going to be a slog the rest of the way. Alright, I do not have that oriented properly. That looks much better. And then the gasket. And then the auxiliary gasket. What this appears to be doing is sealing off the fuel passage into a very tight, compact area. Because this is ribbed, so it really seals it off. Not really seeing what other impact it would have. Alright, when you go to put this cover back on, you got to somehow open your throttle and get it out of the way while not disturbing the orientation of your gasket. It may be easier to assemble this on the cover. But I wanted to show the stack and try and understand it. And the reason you've got to open the throttle is your idle screw. That's where it contacts, so it's going to be in the way. Yes, you could back the screw off and then it's not an issue, but then you've changed your idle speed. And I have to assume that it's set where it ran on a saw relatively recently in that saw's life. Alright, that is very tight. Let's see. Get a little adapter hose here. Let's see how everything is sealing for us. I would fully expect a leak around the fuel pump gasket, since that is so common these days. But let's just see. Now, what am I not remembering here? Oh. Now, that's the needle that's leaking by. So what did I assemble incorrectly? I have the axle in a bind and I didn't realize it. Try that again. That's what it was. I didn't have that axle seated properly. Look at that. Damn near rock solid. That's actually somewhat impressive. That's actually really impressive. Alright, let's see if we can install this. Oh, look at that, I already released it. What a dummy. I'm going to say install this half without releasing it, but I failed that test right up front. Line up. It's close. Let's see if we can take it home. That was brilliant. That was ultra brilliant. Sure glad I did that. If all else fails, just throw the carb parts at it. It'll work out in the end. There we go. Well, she's not moving much. Pretty tight carb. I like it. Now again, this kit includes the long skinny Welch plug for the idle circuit. I have never on one of these had a reason to pull that out. Not one single time. So, I'm not going to. Okay. That is amazing. That is awesome. Let's go ahead and reset our high-speed needle. Now again, because it has a single feed hole, you're going to have to fine tune both sides of the carb. I mean, when you touch the high side, you're impacting the amount of fuel that's flowing on the low side. So if for some reason you had it too lean at first or too rich, don't be shocked if you've got to go to both needles. I'm going to go open one turn. Good enough. And then we'll slip our idle grommet back on. That'll have to be fine-tuned as it goes into the saw. Pretty sweet. I am not at all unhappy with how this came out. There you go, folks. Get rid of all the crap. A Zama C1S H3 carburetor for a Homelite 330 rebuilt. So even though there's a little more to these than you know, an HS, there's not that much more. There's one extra piece of diaphragm. You've got to understand how that high-speed nozzle and check valve works. But again, it's so rare that one of those is bad. It just, for me, it doesn't happen. Maybe there's folks out there that have had a different scenario, but this carb is ready to bolt on the 330 and run like a scalded ape. So, if you have any questions about this process, you do know how to find me. Catch you guys on the next video.